Welcome, everybody, back to the next episode of Hardball Talks, brought to you by Extreme Baseball and Softball Club. And Hardball Talks is a podcast that brings together life, sports, and kind of the collision that happens between them. We have special guests on, usually weekly, to share with you their experiences, their expertise, and just their knowledge in hopes that it provides value to those that are listening. We know we have families listen, we have players listen, and we have coaches listen. And Hardball Talks is just an entertaining opportunity to share what the journey has been for various people in the game of baseball and softball. I'm your host, Brett Swip, and today I am joined by Angie Fingerhut. And Angie has a couple sons in the Extreme Baseball and Softball Club, and we've gotten a chance to meet this year and learn a little bit about each other, and just thought it would be a cool opportunity to bring her on and let her tell her story and her family's journey in baseball and ultimately to the Extreme organization. So Angie, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate
it. Yeah. Just start off, maybe, tell us a little bit about that journey. What has youth sports looked like in your household?
Yeah, so youth sports started out with my kids, of course, when they were, T-ball age, 5. Yeah. And I honestly didn't want to start them at the earliest age because I figured at 4 or 5, my kids, I think they were almost 6 when they started, but starting at that 4 or 5, they didn't have the attention span. We played in the backyard. We did the things with the little kid toys and stuff. That was good enough for me at that point in time. So of course we started when they were about 6. They also did, rec soccer. They still do rec soccer. But we, of course, came up through the Tri-Township Park District in Troy there, through their rec league. I coached and helped coach both of them a little bit along the way where I could, because I know that this whole thing takes a village, no matter what age you're at, it seems like. So always stepping in.
You answer the call. You answered the call.
Yeah. Gotta step up. I'm not going to sit back and complain about somebody else if I didn't jump in there to do it myself. So that was fun experience, when they're real little and kind of working their way up. Both of my kids, when they hit the 9U age group in rec league, is kind of when we started to sense we're growing out of this a little bit. Our kids are getting bored, and I didn't want them to think that baseball's boring. So at that point is when we kind of seeked out some select opportunities to get them into something a little bit more challenging. And so with rec league soccer, also kind of same thing, just wanting to diversify them as athletes, doing different motions with their bodies, stuff like that. So, friends of ours that we've known that have kids same age as us, they kind of roped me into helping coach soccer. And I was never a soccer person. I distinctly recall telling my husband, like shortly after we got married, that I'm never going to be a soccer mom. I'm never going to be a soccer. I hope my kids don't want to play soccer. And here I was helping coach. So going on I think we're on 5 or 6 years now of coaching rec league soccer. So that's kind of our journey so far. And here we are with Extreme.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I jotted down a few notes as you were just talking about that journey. One, the time that you spent in the backyard, with your boys. And I think that's so valuable. Sometimes we look for organized sports to kind of replace that, and I don't think it does. And I think those times together, and now I get to see you actually working with your boys all the time, doing extra work, and it starts, it starts in that. And then the second thing I would just give you kudos for is answering that call. Whenever you assign your, I just recently signed up one of my sons for Upward Basketball, and you're getting the ask, right? You're going to get asked to help, and those that say yes are truly difference makers, because those types of opportunities don't exist without people volunteering and stepping up. So kudos to you and your family for doing so. How did your journey to the Extreme come about?
So I kind of knew about Extreme, and going back to conversations you and I have had of just about our past and kind of networking of people who we've known over the years. My younger sister played softball at SIU Carbondale, and played along with another fellow teammate, Jen Doring, and we knew that Jen had kind of started up Turn 2 and had some ties in with Extreme, and then kind of made that connection. So I knew about it years ago, early 2000s. And then when when my son started playing, what I'll call select, when we finally, first stepped out of rec league, we were just playing on an independent team in Swivel. And so, of course, we played against a couple Extreme teams because there was 2 teams our age. And so we did play against them a little bit. So that was just kind of like the very early on awareness of extreme,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
Yeah, that transition from from recreation ball to an independent team. Kind of maybe talk about that a little bit. How did that come about? Is that something that you led or others led? How did that come about?
So I will say it just seems like a lot of these big transitional things, both in like my life and our kids' lives and things, have just somewhat happened organically. Like they were never forced, which has been really nice that we haven't really had to struggle. I think just having like a broad network of people who we know, and a broad network of experiences and just diversity in our lives have kind of made things naturally happen. So the way that came about was, I had another friend at the time who her son was the same age as my older son, and we had just talked back and forth about, hey, we heard that there's maybe a select team out of Troy, and looked a little bit further into it. The coach, he went to school and played baseball with my younger brother. And so I just kind of reached out to him and said, hey, I heard you have a baseball team. Like, are you guys looking for anybody? And so sure enough, he's like, yeah, we're actually looking for like 1 or 2 kids, for next season, and it was like the week before the Swivel postseason tournament for them. And so it was like, hey, just come on out. We actually are short a couple kids that are going on vacation. So he can just jump in and fill in and, play. And we're like, holy cow, this is happening very quickly, right? Like a couple days away. And so we showed up for that. And, my son Henry at the time was super nervous, but, immediately just like blended in with the kids. Some of them he knew from school. Some of them went to the other school, the elementary school in Troy. But they just immediately became good friends, and you would have thought that they'd known each other their whole lives. And the coaches were great, real laid back. They were, of course, like, hey, you ever want to jump in and help do side toss, whatever, come on out and help. And I'm like, it just felt right. So yeah, that's how we kind of jumped into that selective.
Yeah. And maybe when you were making the transition from that to extreme, what were you kind of organically looking for in that transition? What were some of the driving forces, or maybe some of the things that were kind of falling in place during that time?
Yeah, so I actually kind of thought to myself at the time that this might not happen organically. Like I might have to push this a little bit because, at the time we were, it was last summer towards the end of last season, in 2024. And so, my son, and of course, a lot of this I'm talking about like my older son who's 13U now, and I have another one in 10U, but the 13U one was really kind of the driver, towards extreme. So he had kind of felt like he told me that he's kind of hit a point where he wants more. When we were talking about, what are we going to do next season? Are us coaches, are we going to go another year? Are we going to, find an organization to jump onto, maybe not be an independent team anymore, but find something with a little bit more resources. And so we were kind of up in the air. I felt like it was a good time for me to step back from coaching him, because it was getting to where there was a little bit too much. Now, mind you, I always had this rule as mom coach that if my hat is on, I am coach.
Yeah.
If my hat is off, I'm mom.
Yeah.
So like leave the emotions at the entrance to the dugout. We're now coach and player, right? And
right.
So he struggled with that because he was 11 and 12 at the time. It's hard for kids to not be like, mommy. But, it's getting to that point where like, you're almost, you're in middle school now. You can't be, coming back to the dugout crying because you struck out, or maybe you overthrew to first base like that. You can't do that anymore. Like that. I'm saying no from this point on, like you can't do that.
Sure.
No crying in baseball, right? We all heard it. So I felt like it was a good time for me to step back. I wanted him to kind of make the decision. I didn't want it to be about what I wanted, because a lot of times, us as parents and adults, we ruin sports for kids. So I wanted it to be, what he wanted to do. So he told me, we had a talk. He wanted something more challenging, a little bit more, I guess, challenging in the sense of development. Like he needed to be pushed more, I think. Mm-hmm. Which he was doing really well on the team he was on. And he was probably one of the best players, to be honest with you, but he wanted more. Like the speed at which he learns things and executes and, performs, like he just needs faster pace
Mm-hmm.
and more challenging. So when I asked him, I said, is there, a team in particular that you've seen play that you would be interested in being a part of? And the first team he spewed off was Jeff Elkert's team. And so I said, well, that's, we'll pursue that. I will help pave that path for you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I know Jeff and I know Ryan Grindstaff. I know both of them, the coaches of the team. So just did a little reach out off to the side, email, hey guys, I don't know if you're looking for anybody, but Henry's really interested in being on you guys' team. So don't know if you have any spots available, all that. We did pursue lots of other tryouts. I want to say we put him through maybe 6 other tryouts on both on the Illinois and Missouri side. And none of them really which, there's a couple other on Missouri side that have the facilities, and it appeared like they had a kind of a good backing, but I just didn't get like a good feel from them. Like if that's just kind of the gut feeling, nice facilities, great stuff, but it just didn't feel personal to me. It just felt like very, process. Everybody comes here, they want to play in college, they want to go to Major League Baseball. Like that's the path here. And I'm like, I don't know what my kids are going to do long-term with baseball, but I know what he wants to do now. Right. And so we went through the other tryouts. We did a little private tryout and the group tryout for Extreme. And then talked a little bit more with Jeff, and, they worked it out where they were really interested in him. And so we took that spot, and that was, ultimately what he set out for as his number one choice anyway. So even aside with the other opportunities that were offered from all of the other teams he tried out for, we had to, kindly decline and stuck with our gut of what Henry felt was right for him and what felt right to me as well.
Well, thank you for taking us through that. That was awesome to kind of understand, that deliberate journey, that you guys went on. And I think you made a comment in there that, we parents can get in the way of that stuff, because we can set our own personal goals, or we can be, attracted to the shiny object, or we can be, fall into the parent peer pressure trap, which I say still exists when you're 35, 45 years old. Yeah. So, kudos to you and your husband and your family for, taking a process-oriented journey and really understanding that development needed to be at the core, and, the relationship needed to be at the core. And so, yeah, maybe go into why, you kind of shared a little bit, but maybe dive in just a little bit more of why did you select Extreme? What about Extreme? You talked about the gut feeling, the personal, kind of relationship connection, the development. Maybe just highlight a few of those from your words a little bit more.
Yeah. So like I said, I was kind of, focused on my 12-year-old a little bit more as kind of like the priority in the process. But, actually before he went to his tryout, my younger son went to the 10U combine that Chris stood up, early on before tryouts. It's kind of like that low pressure, just come run through a tryout or run through a practice, go through some activities, check out the facility. And I thought that was an awesome idea, awesome opportunity. 9-year-olds don't need the stress of like, you're trying out for a baseball team, right? It's kind of a lot for them. And I knew my kid, like, he does not like my 9-year-old. He does not like being in the spotlight. He kind of just wants to like operate behind the scenes, and not really be like in the middle and people watching him and scoring him on things. Like, he didn't like that. So the combine was an awesome opportunity. And then at that combine, his coach, Eric Jones of the 10U team, he approached us and, immediately was like, hey, I don't know what you guys are interested in or what you're really looking for, but, I just saw a little bit of Harold in the cages, and, I would really like to look at him more, and he was not going to be at the Extreme tryouts. He was they had a vacation planned already. So they were going to be out of town, and he said, I'm going to miss the tryout, which you guys can certainly still go. But, we would love to do just kind of a, private tryout if we could ahead of time. And I'll bring some of the players from our current team and, make it not feel, awkward. Just have some other kids there play around. And so we did that. And, that was kind of the one organic thing with him that happened. It wasn't really at the formal tryout. He he stood out himself. You know, I didn't go up to anybody and say, "Hey, I'm Angie Fingerhut. My kid's Harold. You know, look at him,
Right.
look
Sure.
at him." Like, I didn't do any of that. I just sat in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for him to like stand out, make himself stand out a little bit, even though he was not expecting to or not trying to, and that coach took notice of,
Mm-hmm.
I think, a little bit of his like humility in that process, and thought this kid looks like he would really be a good fit for our team, just, you know, culture wise, not even baseball skill wise, but
Right.
just personality wise, that he would be a good fit. And so, you know, that happened and that worked out. And I said, well, I mean, if you want him, you can have him. Like, I don't have to go through the process of 5 or 6 other tryouts for my 9-year-old kid. I don't need to put him through that if I don't have to, right? And so with the older one, then, you know, a couple weeks later or whatever it was, just kind of did like the private tryout with Jeff Elkert's team for him. And, you know, back and forth did it a couple times because I think there's a couple other kids that Jeff was interested in that also had reached out. And so ultimately kind of came down to weighing the options that they, you know, they offered Henry a spot. And here we are. That was kind of and so what brought, I guess I'll get back to your original point. I have a tendency to talk a lot, right? Like, long story short, that doesn't happen with me.
No,
so the long way to get to where like I felt like it was a good fit is just that first 10U combine, first of all, I thought was an awesome idea in itself. That, wow, this organization actually really does care about not being like a formal tryout, you know, in that high pressure situation for youth athletes. And so we went to that first time walking into the facility at the annex, and it was comfortable for us. It wasn't, you know, flashy lights and fancy. And I say that in a good way. Like it's not the latest and greatest and, you know, high performance, high technology, like you know, but that's comfortable for us, that it's like, it's a good place that is not trying to hide behind flashy lights and you know, flair. It's a place where you go to do work, and the facility had everything that I could have imagined and more. I couldn't believe the amount of, you know, batting cages that were in there, and the open turf areas, and the bullpen and catching area, and fitness area, like team meeting room, like all of these things that I didn't even see some of these things at some of the other facilities, you know, we went to. And so that in itself just seemed very comfortable for me. And all the people, you know, having people right up there at the front desk to talk to and greet you and kind of point you in the right direction was very helpful. So yeah, I think ultimately that, and just kind of a combination of the coaches' interactions with us, you know, completely unprovoked, was kind of what made me think, like, if this is our organically happening process, this is probably what it needs to be, and I don't need to force anything else. Like, this is where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for, again, just kind of opening your heart and sharing those journeys and those conversations. You know, I first noticed, you know, you and your family in here practicing and getting extra work. And of course, I get to train your boys a little bit in network training at various times. And but, you know, I noticed you guys were always coming in and feeding the machines and, you know, getting some extra batting practice or some extra work. Talk a little bit about that. You mentioned, you know, the facility and, you know, feeling comfortable, and obviously you have felt comfortable to be able to use it as part of, you know, being a part of the club. Maybe share that experience.
Yeah. So, you know, honestly, as soon as both of my kids were kind of like confirmed as being on teams, their first question was, can we go to the annex now? Can we go to the annex now? Constantly, like every day, until I got that email that said, here, you can sign up, like you can register now. Yeah. And I was like, hey guys, we can go to the annex now. And they were super excited. And it was like, I think we were in there like every day that first week, maybe. They couldn't get enough of it. And I was super excited because they were excited. Yeah. And so I think even still, I don't think we've been in there other than maybe the week of Christmas. Like, we haven't been in there at least 2, 3, 4 days a week usually. But just having that as a resource that, you know, like I said, my kids are kind of like that high energy, need to be challenged constantly. So winter months, of course, around here is not ideal for doing things outside, as much as we try to do things outside. But having that indoor facility that's so easy to just, you know, go to the website and reserve a cage, whatever, and just show up, has been like, I couldn't even tell you how invaluable that's been of just having that resource. Because otherwise, I'm not sure like what else my kids would be doing. I'd have to be forcing them to like go outside, go do this, go like forcing them because it's, it's not ideal outside, right? But like having them go indoor, go use the facility, it's definitely been an enticing, factor to get them engaged. And I don't force it either. At this point, they're the ones asking, hey, can we go? I know we're off today, but can we go? Or, whatever. But, getting in there early on. And obviously I grew up playing softball. I've been around batting cages. I've been around facilities. I've been around the equipment. But of course, other than the jugs machines, they're all a little bit different, right? And so going in there and trying to figure out how to use the machines. And, one of the guys that was up at the front desk happened to kind of be walking around one day, and I was feeding some balls to my 12-year-old because he got a new catcher's mitt. So I just wanted to, and he's new to catching this year also. So just trying to work with him on just, without wearing my shoulder out anymore, of just working with him, breaking the mitt, just different things. And that young man, I forget what his name is. He came over and he's like, hey, you got a new mitt? And I was like, yeah, trying to break it in, trying to just get some reps in, and he's like, you mind if I give you some advice? And I was like, no, come on in and help me out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, came in and was like, here, set the mitt up right in front of the machine and just constantly feed balls into that mitt. It'll just be constant repetitive at the high speed to, break in that leather quicker. And just little things like that was awesome to have him jump in and help out and make us feel even more comfortable and able to use the equipment and not afraid to use things and stuff like that. So
yeah, it definitely is a family feel. It definitely is. So let's go down the development path. Development was something that, has been, I've heard you talk about, multiple times that, it's a development journey for you and your family, and making sure that your boys are being pushed to, continuously improve. How have you seen, network training and, the extra training and all the, the development opportunities that are made available? How, maybe share on that through your lens.
Yeah. And I'll be honest. And this was kind of one of the things you and I talked about when we, talked a few weeks back, that network training wasn't even something that I knew about when we decided to sign up for the organization. And so then as we talked more with the coaches, it was more about like, yeah, so, once we get started, we'll do a couple fall tournaments just to have the boys, play together and kind of go through the motions. And, since there was a new kid on the team, kind of, build the team up a little bit more around new players. And then he said, in November, we'll start network training and we'll do like, all these months of, we do pitching and defense and hitting and strength and conditioning. And oh, by the way, they're adding catching this year. And I was like, wow. So like all of these specific, skills work, like we get that as part of, they're like, yeah. So I had no idea even before I said, yeah, I'm like, we're in for it, before I even knew about that. And then finding out later after the fact was like, well, this is even better. Now I feel like I'm giving way more of my money's worth now of just not just being on a baseball team, which I think that's a lot of times what a lot of parents maybe have the misconception of, is that you're not just on a baseball team. Like it's so much more than that. And, if they come inside and they watch their kids and they listen and observe the trainers and hear what they're saying and see the things that they're picking up on with your kid, that enables you to now go back. And when you do have time in your backyard at home, or if you come up to the annex in your spare time to work on things, you now know what the trainers are seeing and what the trainers think that your kid maybe needs to work more on. And so you're giving them a little bit, because a lot of the parents may not have played the sport. Honestly, their kids may have just picked up on it. They don't have the history with it. I have the history, and there's still stuff trainers are picking up on that I'm like, oh, wow, I would not have even thought of it that way. But it's also been 25 years since I've played. So like I'm a little bit, rusty in some things, but just getting in there and hearing the feedback, observing, seeing how they work with the kids has been awesome. And like you said, I'm in there every single time, like hovering over everybody, watching everything. Cause I want to be involved. Like I want to know what's going on. I want to like watch the interaction with my kid and the trainers and the coaches and their players and the whole thing. To me, I don't want to miss out like on any of it. Right. Cause like it's only here for so long, and
good for you.
Don't want to miss out on it. But yeah, the network training has been awesome.
Yeah, I think the two things that you just talked about there, the facility access that's included in being a part of the extreme and the network training. Um, Network training is so different. I'm a network trainer, so I get to be in with teams and helping them in certain skills, but I'm also a coach and help coach other teams, and I get to be around when trainers are helping our team. And it really is it's an opportunity for not only the athletes to get better, but it's an opportunity for coaches to kind of put our egos away and just listen and learn, and maybe see if there's other ways that trainers can connect with our athletes.
Mhm.
Network training really is such a difference maker for all of our developments as coaches and athletes, and really when families understand that, and they, like you said, it's kind of we talk about this. We've talked about this recently, that since COVID, as parents, we don't always go into facilities when our kids are in there. Like I may go to might take my son to a basketball practice, and I don't know if I can go into the gym or not go into the gym, and because there's just always been, there's the last few years, there's been kind of weird rules around that, or some changes. But the reality is that we do want families to come in, and we want them to hear and see, because ultimately, if you're reinforcing that, or if you then complement that with coming in and doing extra work and working on that, it's really a three-legged stool, where you have the athlete and the coach and the family, and you're kind of working that together as a unit. It really is a healthy experience. And I want to maybe go down a misconception here, because ultimately, honestly, one of the things that we hear the most, that when athletes or families are making a decision to come to the extreme or come into select ball or whatever it may be, like is a cost. It's an investment. You're investing time and you're investing money, and it is way more than just the baseball team. And I loved how you said that. You said something to me a few weeks back that said, I'm getting my money's worth, because I'm getting the training, and I'm taking it, we're bringing our kids in. And really, if you don't understand that, or you don't value that, that's when you're going to think that it's not worth it. Maybe just share on, kind of the investment perspective and the money side from your family's eyes.
Yeah, I mean, if you really break it down and compare dollars to dollars, if you were to go anywhere else and rent a facility as many times as you need to, compared to how much you get it included with network training, and even just not with network training, even just going in on your own, however many times that you may want, ideally to be able to go in and work with your kids privately or whatever. But if you break it down dollar for dollar, I guarantee you, you're going to spend probably 3 times more, if not more than that, than what we're spending on this organization and the resources that come with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that's what we as families, we have to understand it and get our situations kind of apples to apples, because you talked about catcher training. I mean, your son's getting to learn catching, and that's included in his player fee. And what a great opportunity. I talk about softball pitching a lot. It's kind of a skill that's really, there's not a lot of young girls out there that practice it and work on it, and a lot of it is because they don't want to do private lessons just yet on it. But you get it in network training, so it's a great way to also increase kids' availability to learn other sports, or learn other positions and diversify. So you really got to compare apples to apples whenever you're looking at the various costs of experiences.
Mhm.
What's different about network training in your mind as compared to, you were a coach, right? And you ran a team and you just ran practice. So what's, when you're watching network training and you're watching, and you're thinking about when you were leading coach led practices, what's different about it?
So I will say we had a little bit of a special circumstance with our independent team, because our head coach, had
Mm-hmm.
bought a house and had a big pole barn behind
Yep.
it that he didn't really need to fill with stuff. So we filled it with baseball. We got turf and we got cages, and we all came together and had a big team party, and we
Yep.
hung cages in the shop. And we started in the winter. Uh, Me and a couple of the other coaches, we would lead the strength and conditioning 2 days a week in that facility, and all winter long. And so once we hit about February is when we cut off the strength and conditioning. We started to focus more on baseball skills training. So we were
Mm-hmm.
doing some hitting drills, doing some fielding drills, just getting into some pitching, light pitching. And then once it was warm enough, we were out on the field. But I will say, it's been kind of nice, like a little bit personally gratifying. That was like, hey, we kind of, we
Yeah.
were a little bit ahead of ourselves. That, like, we were setting all this stuff up, and I didn't even know that we were basically running our own little kind of
Yeah.
mini version of network
Yeah.
training
Yep.
in a way. So that was good, but a little bit of validation there. But yeah, I think with the coaches kind of taking a back seat at network training and letting the trainers work, it gives the kids a little bit of, like change up of, it's even with parents and coaches, right? So you have that transition of like, parents have to stop coaching at some point because your kids just they're hearing the parent in their head, and you know how kids start to just tune out their parents, right? And they don't want to listen to what their parents have to say. So same thing with coaches. They hear their coaches so much, they kind of start to tune out the coaches and like, oh, our coach doesn't know what they're talking about or whatever. And getting that third aspect of trainers. So now you're getting to talk to the trainers. The trainers are working with you on specific skills development. They're talking to you about situations and building the IQ around that skill. And then, they all kind of work together in the whole big picture of baseball, right?
Yep.
And so having the coaches there and kind of helping out, they're doing side toss, they're doing different things just to kind of like be a second, third set of hands, as opposed to like the dominating voice in the process. And I think that just also keeps our kids a little bit more on their toes about listening and executing and knowing that they're not just going to get by with, trying to hide in the corner and like lazy take a ground ball or something like that. That this trainer's paying attention and they're going to make sure you're doing everything right every single time you do it.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. It really is a collaboration, and I think the best experience for my boys are in the program too, and the best experience for them is when it's not about one coach or it's not about one trainer, right? It's not about dad. It's not about like their development is really has a team of resources around them. They have all kinds of trainers, all kinds of coaches that are saying similar things. Nobody's trying to one up each other, right? And ultimately, they're trying to make my boys become their own coaches, right? Become their own motivators. And I think that team of resources really makes it comfortable for the young men, because they have some people to look up to. They have their team coach, of course, but then they also have some trainers that ask them how they're doing, or stop in and say hi to them if they see them getting some extra work. So they end up almost having a whole posse of
Yes.
people to support them.
I will say, and just to tag on to that, my kids actually, like, they get really excited when, maybe we're in there just on our own doing some extra work and, Hunter comes by and fist bumps, or Casey walks by and, hey, looking good, dude, or, something. It just gets a little extra feather in their hat that they're being noticed,
That's good. Give some encouragement to the families. You kind of said, you come inside, see what's going on, be involved, give, you only have so much amount of time to really get to experiences with your athlete. We put out seminars, we put out, different events that you can come to and be a part of. Give some encouragement to families to be a part of that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely would. So I went to the first baseball parent seminar a couple weeks ago, and even aside from like being there at all the network training and hearing things and already kind of having conversations with the trainers, it was even a little bit more of an opportunity for me to ask questions based on like my observation and my knowledge of training and skills and that kind of thing. I've noticed a little bit different strategy with them than like what I thought would be appropriate for youth teams. And so it gave me that opportunity to ask those questions about, hey, I've noticed that with pitching that you guys don't really have them like throwing, to a target or whatever it might be, that, what's your philosophy on that? And just hearing little things like, Sam gave a great aspect with youth with the pitching, that you have to focus more on the psychology of how these little kids' brains work, that making them throw a ball at a very small target 40 feet away or 50 feet away, like wherever they're at, that's stressful to them. And it just adds anxiety to a layer of their physical ability that doesn't need to be there. Mm-hmm. And so we don't, like, the trainers don't want to put too much emphasis on that perfection, like hit that small target consistently every single time. So setting up, the grid nets, and where they're just aiming at a bigger target. As long as you hit somewhere on that target, you're doing good. Those kinds of things that, as a parent and like former coach, like I didn't really think of it that way, that I was more thinking like they should be working more on the mechanics and like making sure you're pitching, like in your body's moving the right way and doing the right things that will help your accuracy long term. So that was like a complete flip for me, that I was like, wow, I was thinking about it wrong the whole time. So now I understand why the trainers are approaching it that way, instead of me just sitting back and going, I really wish they would do it this way, whatever. So it gives you that open perspective of, some of them have been trained in like sports psychology and the youth development. So like they know way more about this than I do, the science behind all of it. So that was a really good opportunity. And I would encourage, I don't know if all the baseball ones are done or if you still have some open, but I would definitely recommend people go to those and just speak up. Like, don't be shy and just sit back and listen to the, PowerPoint presentation. Like, it's so much more than that. They're giving you their perspective as kind of a starting place for conversation, but they definitely want you to ask your questions and have conversation around it, because not only are we learning from the trainers are learning from our feedback as well.
That's right.
So I think that was the most valuable thing, two things I got of it. I'm learning more, but understanding that, my experience and my feedback and kind of what I've observed was also helping them kind of, go back and take a look at their plans and see how those things could be improved.
That's right.
So.
That's right. Yep. That's great. Yeah, definitely kind of that open dialogue is something that we're really, pushing for and striving for, and trying to make invitations to families to do that, because, our trainers, one, they do have that experience and they will bring that, but at the same time, they're in the same development journey too, right? We're constantly trying to improve and learn better ways to evolve. Let's maybe kind of finish up just, now that you've been in for a few months and have been a part of the Extreme, maybe rewind a year ago. What do you know now about the Extreme that maybe you didn't know then? What's something that is, now that you're in it, has been really cool and eye-opening for you?
I mean, aside from everything I've already talked about, I would say one of the things I didn't really know, which it seems like a small detail, but it could make a huge difference, is that my perspective was that the teams in this organization are already set. There's only certain teams at certain age groups, and like, that's it. If they have an opening, then you can try out and maybe you'll have an opportunity to be on that team. But if they don't have any open spots and nobody's leaving, there's no turnover happening, then you're out of luck. But, had we gone back, how I said that conversation that us coaches had on our previous team about, are we going to just split up? Are we going to go this way? Are we going to take our team to an organization that has more resources that we just can't provide as volunteer parents,
Right.
If you have one of those teams, like, you can come to Brett. And Brett, I don't know what your cutoff is, or if you're just open at any time to take more teams, but certainly it's worth reaching out and saying, hey, I'm coaching a swivel team, or I'm picking up a bunch of kids from a rec league team that I think really should be in a better situation and being developed more at a higher level than just at the park league and practicing, one day a week. Can we come bring our team over to Extreme? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. Come bring your team over, and we, you guys provide coaching and advising and guidance for coaches. And then, that you have coaches that align with your same principles of the organization, and that you can have confidence that they're going to coach in the way that the philosophy of the Extreme organization wants them to coach in. And then, they start coming into network training, they start listening to the trainers, then everybody has that same mindset going forward, and it just helps with the consistency of the integrity of the organization.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And sometimes I think, we as the organization think, well, yeah, everybody knows if you're interested in the program, whether you're a team or a family, like, come on over, or a coach. But really it is an invitation. And, we have a new advisory board that has started this year, and somebody on the advisory board, we were kind of talking about this idea of like, what is the right size of a club or an organization? And it's not a number for us. It's very much having the right fit for every athlete based on the season that they're in. And what I mean by that is, you may have an athlete that's pre-puberty, at 14 years old and hasn't fully developed, but loves the game and just needs a place to develop. Like, we want to have that right fit for that athlete. Just because they haven't fully blossomed and, become that 14-year-old stud, like, we don't want to shun away from that athlete still loving the game. So we want an entry level, type of program. And then also, the athlete that has developed, that needs more pushing, that is the best on their current team, but needs to get to a higher level. Like, we want to make sure that we have that high end as well. So it's not a number for us. It's very much we want kids to love the game, and we want them to go all the way through their 18 to 25, somewhere in that range. And, we want them to get back to the game and want to get back to the game when they're done with it. So it's definitely if you're a team or if you're a family and you're looking for that kind of development, personal, relationship-based fit, it's worth having a conversation with us, because, we may be able to kind of fit you into that roadmap of development that makes sense for either your team or your individual. So yeah. Sometimes we forget about, sharing that. And I appreciate you kind of, reminding us to make sure we're talking about that. Yeah. Well, let's just, I think that's been a great, overview of your journey, and maybe if you want to, is there anything you want to kind of close with?
No, I just think it's been kind of a gaining experience along the way. We thought we were going in at a certain level of expectation, and we've, been impressed even more and more along the way. So feeling like definitely getting our money's worth, like you said, every step of the way. So, we're getting close to getting outside here soon. As long as this, silly cold can get out of here, we can start getting outside. We had our 13U team had an indoor tournament last weekend up in Iowa. And so that was a good experience just to get them back on the field. You could definitely tell that they were a little rusty of just going through the network training motions. Like, hey, you're in a game now, start thinking more and compete. So that was good. And we just can't wait to get back out and watch some games. So.
Well, we love having your boys around and your family around, and look forward to, a long-term, kind of relationship of friends and coaches and trainers with you guys. And thank you so much for being willing to share your story. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to Hardball Talks. And that was a great opportunity to get to see, a family's experience transitioning into the extreme and what they're getting out of it, and how we as a club can continue to serve them better. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll look forward to having you at the next one.